I had not seen my family in over 5 years. London had swallowed me whole, with its relentless pace and the comforting anonymity it offered. I buried myself in work, friends, and the illusion that the past could no longer reach me. But then, one rainy November evening, as I sat alone in my flat watching the raindrops chase each other down the windowpane, my phone buzzed. A message. From Dad. "Please, Amelia. Come home for Christmas. We all miss you." 7 words. Simple. Yet somehow, they shattered the wall I had built around my heart. I stared at the message for a long time, my chest tightening, memories I thought I had buried surfacing with painful clarity. Ashford, Kent. The house with the crooked fence. Mum's laughter before she passed. The sharp change after Dad remarried. Cold glances, whispered conversations, doors that never seemed open to me anymore. I almost deleted the message. Almost. But something about the way he wrote, something desperate, almost apologetic, stopped me. Against every instinct, I found myself booking a flight. The day I arrived back in England, the sky was a heavy, miserable grey. As the plane descended, I caught a glimpse of the familiar patchwork of green fields below, dotted with little stone cottages and winding country lanes. I felt a strange cocktail of fear and hope churn inside me. Maybe things had changed. Maybe they really did want me back. At arrivals, I searched the crowd. I had imagined Dad waving, maybe even crying, the way he used to when I was a little girl. Instead, I found him standing stiffly by the exit, scrolling on his phone. He glanced up, gave a quick nod, and pocketed the device. No hug. No smile. "Come on, Amelia," he said, his voice brisk. "The others are waiting at home." That was it. No warmth, no welcome. Just a command, as if I were a guest he had been forced to collect. The drive to Ashford was thick with silence. Dad fiddled with the radio, the static filling the awkward space between us. I watched the familiar landmarks flash by, Mrs. Bentley's flower shop, the village green where we used to have picnics. Everything looked the same, yet everything felt alien. When we finally pulled up outside the old family house, my heart twisted. The white paint was peeling, the front garden wild and overgrown. Had time really stood still here, or had I simply been gone too long? Inside, the air was colder than the winter outside. My stepmother, Catherine, greeted me with a tight-lipped smile. "Hello, Amelia. You look different," she said, her eyes flickering with something I could not quite name. Pity. Disdain. My step-uncle Robert hovered awkwardly by the fireplace, while cousin Oliver lounged on the sofa, tapping lazily on his phone. No one rushed to hug me. No one even offered me a cup of tea. I stood there, suitcase in hand, feeling like an intruder in my own home. Then Dad clapped his hands together, startling me. "We've sorted out a bed for you," he said brightly. "It's all ready in the garage. Nice and private. Sophie's using the guest room, of course, since she and her fiancé are staying." The words hung in the air like a slap. The garage. As if I were some stray they had no space for. I swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in my eyes. "Of course," I managed to say, forcing a smile so brittle it could have shattered. As I followed Dad through the kitchen and out to the chilly, damp garage, every step felt heavier. A flimsy cot with a thin blanket had been placed against one wall. A portable heater buzzed weakly in the corner. Boxes of old junk towered around me like forgotten memories. This was my welcome home. The holiday had only just begun, and already I felt the old wounds reopening, raw and unhealed. Somewhere deep inside, a small, fierce voice whispered, "This time, it will be different." But for now, I simply sat down on the cot, wrapped my coat tighter around me, and stared into the darkness. The first night back home was brutal. The portable heater barely made a dent in the cold that seeped through the garage walls. I wrapped myself tighter in the thin blanket, but the chill found its way into my bones. Every creak of the old house, every gust of wind outside, kept me awake. It was like the house itself was rejecting me. Somewhere around dawn, I finally drifted into a restless sleep. But I woke with a start when the garage door rattled violently. Disoriented, heart hammering, I stumbled out of bed. It was only the wind. Or so I thought. Through the crack beneath the door, I saw shadows moving. Whispers. Laughter. I pressed my ear against the cold metal and listened. I still can't believe she actually came back, a woman's voice said. Catherine. Well, it makes things easier, doesn't it, replied a man. Probably Robert. A pause. Then a soft chuckle. As long as she stays out of the way. Their words hit harder than the cold. My fists clenched at my sides. I should have known. Their smiles last night had been as fake as the dusty wreath hanging on the front door. Part of me wanted to storm into the house, demand answers. But another part, the smarter part, told me to wait. Watch. Listen. There was something going on here, something they were desperate to hide. Later that morning, after everyone had left for some last-minute Christmas shopping, I slipped into the main house. I wandered through the familiar yet foreign rooms, the air thick with the scent of stale potpourri and furniture polish. Memories flashed before me at every turn. Mum singing in the kitchen, the smell of her cinnamon rolls baking in the oven. Christmas mornings filled with laughter and chaos. I shook the memories away. This was not that home anymore. Drawn by a strange feeling, I found myself in Dad's study. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, everything was neat to the point of obsession. I was about to turn away when something caught my eye, a letter, half buried under a stack of papers on the desk. The envelope was addressed to Dad, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Mum's. With trembling hands, I pulled it free and opened it. Inside was a short note, written in the elegant, flowing script I remembered so well. To be read upon my passing, it began. I swallowed hard and kept reading. Mum had left instructions. Not just about her funeral, but about me. She wanted me to inherit her half of the family home. She had begged Dad to ensure I would always have a place here. Tears blurred my vision. But none of that had happened. Instead, they had shoved me into the garage and treated me like an unwanted guest. Why? Where was Mum's will? Had Dad ignored it? Or had someone made sure it disappeared? A noise outside the study jolted me. Footsteps. I shoved the letter back under the pile and darted out of the room just as Catherine's voice floated down the hallway. Is everything ready for tonight? She called. Almost, Robert replied. Amelia won't even know what hit her. My blood ran cold. Whatever plan they had, it was happening tonight. And I had no idea what I was walking into. But one thing was certain. I was done being the quiet, obedient daughter they could cast aside. This time, I would be ready. The sun dipped low, casting long, ominous shadows across the house as evening crept in. I stood outside the garage, heart pounding, watching the windows glow warmly from within. The festive lights they had strung up earlier now seemed to mock me, their cheerfulness hiding the cruelty festering inside these walls. I needed answers. I needed proof. And tonight, while they were distracted with whatever scheme they had prepared, I would find it. I waited until the house grew quieter, until the clinking of glasses and low hum of conversation from the living room signaled that Catherine and Robert had settled in with their drinks. Moving silently, I slipped through the side door. The house smelled of mulled wine and roasted meat, but underneath it all, there was something rotten, something wrong. I crept toward the study again, careful to avoid the creaky floorboards. But as I reached the doorway, I froze. Voices. Inside. Leaning closer, I caught snippets of the conversation. Did you hide it well enough? Catherine asked, her voice sharp. Robert grunted. She will never find it. Not unless she rips the whole place apart. And the papers from her mother? Catherine pressed. Destroyed. Burned to ash, Robert replied smugly. I sucked in a breath. My fists trembled with rage. They had destroyed Mum's wishes. They had made sure I would have nothing. After Christmas, we'll sell the house, Catherine continued. Split the money. Start fresh. What about Amelia? Robert asked. Another cruel laugh. She'll have no choice but to leave. No one will believe her, even if she tries to fight us. Their words sliced through me like knives. I stumbled back, heart racing, mind whirling. I needed a new plan. Storming in now would be useless. They would deny everything, twist it all against me. No. I needed to expose them. I needed undeniable proof. The attic. The thought came to me suddenly. Dad had always kept important documents hidden up there, tucked away among old boxes and forgotten furniture. Maybe, just maybe, they had missed something. Keeping to the shadows, I made my way upstairs. Every creak of the staircase was a gunshot in the silent house. I paused, holding my breath, until the sounds of laughter drifted up once more, masking my movements. At the end of the narrow hallway, the attic door loomed. I tugged the string, and the rickety ladder unfolded with a groan. Praying it would not betray me, I climbed up into the darkness. The attic smelled of dust and decay. Moonlight filtered through a grimy window, casting eerie beams across the cluttered space. Old trunks. Broken furniture. Stacks of yellowed newspapers. I moved quickly but carefully, searching, sifting through the wreckage of forgotten years. At the far end, half hidden beneath a moth-eaten blanket, I found an old cedar chest. My heart leapt. I threw back the cover. Inside were photo albums, letters, and, at the very bottom, a folder tied with a faded blue ribbon. With trembling hands, I untied it. Documents spilled out, original deeds, personal letters, and there, folded neatly, was a copy of Mum's last will and testament. Tears pricked my eyes as I read the words. She had left her share of the house to me, as I had suspected. She had trusted me to protect her legacy. I had the proof now. But I had to be smart. One wrong move, and they would tear it from me again. As I gathered the documents, a floorboard below creaked loudly. Panic surged through me. Someone was coming. I stuffed the papers into my jacket and backed away from the chest, heart hammering against my ribs. The attic ladder groaned. A shadow loomed at the top. I pressed myself into the darkest corner, barely daring to breathe. Through the gloom, I saw Robert's face, twisted with suspicion, scanning the attic. He stepped forward, footfalls heavy on the fragile boards. One wrong sound, one misplaced movement, and he would find me. I clutched the folder tighter, praying the darkness would shield me. But the danger was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. The air in the attic grew heavier with each passing second. I pressed myself deeper into the shadows, my breath shallow and silent, as Robert's boots thudded against the fragile wooden floor. He paused just meters away from me, squinting into the darkness. I dared not move, dared not blink. The slightest rustle would betray my hiding spot. Minutes stretched into an agonizing eternity. Finally, Robert grunted, muttered something under his breath about bloody rats, and turned back towards the ladder. The attic creaked again as he descended, the sound of the trapdoor snapping shut echoing like a gunshot. I remained frozen in place, counting the seconds. Only when I heard their muffled voices drifting back downstairs did I dare to move. My legs trembled as I crept back to the ladder, clutching the precious folder tight against my chest. Slipping down quietly, I closed the attic hatch behind me and slipped into the darkened hallway. For a moment, I leaned against the wall, struggling to calm the hurricane raging inside me. I had the proof. But it would mean nothing if I was caught before I could use it. I needed help. Someone who could protect me, and the documents. Someone who knew the law better than Catherine and Robert combined. My mind raced. There was only one person I could trust, Mr. Whitmore, my father's old solicitor. If anyone could validate Mum's will and stand against them, it was him. But getting out would not be easy. Downstairs, the party had begun again. Music drifted through the house, jolly, tinny carols that felt almost grotesque against the darkness I carried. Voices laughed and clinked glasses. They were celebrating their victory too soon. I made my way carefully towards the back door. Each step felt like a gamble. At any moment, someone might step into the hallway, see me slipping away, and raise the alarm. As I reached for the doorknob, a cold hand clamped down on my wrist. I spun around, heart leaping into my throat. It was Catherine. She smiled sweetly, but her eyes were sharp as blades. "And where do you think you're going, Amelia?" she asked, voice dripping with false concern. I swallowed, forcing my face into a mask of calm. "Just getting some fresh air," I lied smoothly. "It's awfully stuffy in there." Her eyes narrowed. For a terrible moment, I thought she would tear the jacket from my body and expose everything. But then she laughed, a brittle, cruel sound. "Be quick about it," she said. "We're about to open presents." With a final, warning squeeze of my wrist, she let me go. I stumbled outside, gulping the freezing night air. Snow had begun to fall again, covering the world in a thin, deceptive layer of purity. Clutching the folder tighter, I ran. I did not stop until I reached the end of the lane, where the village lights glowed faintly in the distance. Only then did I glance back, heart hammering, half expecting to see Catherine or Robert chasing after me. But the night remained still. For now, I had escaped. But the real battle was only just beginning. I needed to find Mr. Whitmore. And fast. Because Catherine and Robert would soon realize what was missing. And when they did, they would come for me, with everything they had. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I hurried through the village, my breath misting in the freezing night air. The folder was tucked safely beneath my coat, but it felt heavier with every step, as if it carried not just paper, but the entire weight of my future. The streets were deserted. Warm lights glowed behind curtained windows, families gathering for Christmas Eve without any idea of the war raging just beyond their doorstep. I was utterly alone. And I knew that at any moment, Catherine or Robert might come tearing after me, their wrath unleashed. I made my way to the old churchyard, cutting through the rows of ancient gravestones towards the vicarage beyond. Mr. Whitmore lived just past it, in a modest stone cottage at the end of a narrow lane. My legs burned with the effort, but I dared not slow down. Every second counted now. Finally, I reached his door and pounded on it with frozen fists. Lights flickered on inside. I heard shuffling footsteps, then the door creaked open to reveal Mr. Whitmore, stooped with age, his grey hair wild, his eyes bleary with sleep. "Amelia," he croaked, adjusting his glasses. "What on earth?" "I need your help," I gasped, thrusting the folder towards him. "Please, it is about my mother's will. They are trying to steal everything. I have proof." For a moment, he simply stared at me. Then he stepped aside, ushering me in with a grave nod. "Come in, child." Quickly. The warmth inside the cottage wrapped around me like a blanket, but I was too tense to appreciate it. Mr. Whitmore led me into his study, cluttered with piles of dusty books and papers, and locked the door behind us. I spread the contents of the folder out on his desk. The forged signatures. The hidden letters. The bank statements showing the secret transfers Catherine and Robert had made even before the funeral. Mr. Whitmore studied each page carefully, his frown deepening. "This is damning," he said at last, voice low. If what you say is true, they have committed serious crimes, Amelia. I nodded, my hands trembling slightly. What can we do? I whispered. He tapped a finger against his chin, thinking. First, we need to protect this evidence. I will make certified copies and store them in my safe. Then we must take this to the authorities. He looked at me, his gaze sharp. But we must move carefully. If they realize you have exposed them, they may try to destroy the evidence, or silence you altogether. The warning sent a chill deeper than the winter cold through my veins. As Mr. Whitmore began copying the documents, I paced the small study, nerves coiled tight inside me. Outside the window, snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in a deceptive silence. Suddenly, a loud knock shattered the stillness. Both Mr. Whitmore and I froze. The knock came again, louder this time, angrier. He motioned for me to hide. I darted behind the heavy curtains just as Mr. Whitmore unlocked the door. Standing there, framed in the stormy night, were Catherine and Robert. We know she is here, Catherine hissed, her perfect hair now wild around her face. Hand her over, Whitmore, or you will regret it. Mr. Whitmore's voice was calm, but firm. I do not know what you are talking about. Kindly leave before I call the constable. Robert stepped forward menacingly, but Catherine stopped him with a sharp gesture. She fixed Mr. Whitmore with a poisonous glare. This is not over, she spat. Then they were gone, disappearing into the swirling snow. I slipped out from my hiding place, heart hammering. Mr. Whitmore locked the door and turned to me. You must leave, he said urgently. They will not give up. You must disappear until we have enough to bring them down legally. I swallowed hard. Disappear. Leave everything behind, my home, my life. Everything I had ever known. But I nodded. Because if I stayed, I knew I would not survive the night. Mr. Whitmore pressed a small, battered key into my hand. There is a safe house. A friend of mine, Miss Holloway, will take you in. You will be safe there, for now. I tucked the key away and gathered the few papers he handed me. Outside, the snowstorm raged on, a fitting reflection of the chaos that had engulfed my life. There was no turning back now. Only forward, into the unknown. The safe house was nothing like I had imagined. Nestled deep in the woods beyond the village, it was a crumbling old manor, hidden behind tangled hedgerows and ancient oaks. Miss Holloway met me at the gates with a flickering lantern in hand. She was a sharp-eyed woman, tall and thin, her grey hair pulled back into a severe bun. Despite her stern appearance, her voice was surprisingly gentle. You are safe now, Amelia, she said as she led me through the creaking halls. But you must be careful. Catherine and Robert will not rest until they find you. The manor was filled with the scent of damp stone and forgotten memories. Portraits of long-dead ancestors lined the walls, their painted eyes following me wherever I went. Every door groaned on its hinges, and every floorboard protested underfoot. Miss Holloway gave me a small room under the eaves, with a single bed and a narrow window overlooking the frozen woods. It was cold and bare, but it was mine, and for now, it was safe. For 3 days, I remained hidden there. Miss Holloway brought me food and kept me informed. Mr. Whitmore had gone to London to meet with a solicitor he trusted, preparing the case against Catherine and Robert. All I had to do was wait. But the waiting was unbearable. Every gust of wind against the windows made me jump. Every creak of the old house set my heart racing. On the 4th night, as I sat by the window, staring into the darkness, I saw movement among the trees. A flicker of light. A shadow shifting. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to see. There, beyond the fence, someone was creeping through the woods. 2 figures. A man and a woman. Panic rose in my throat. Had they found me already? I rushed down the narrow stairs to find Miss Holloway, my footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. I found her in the kitchen, stoking the fire. "There is someone outside," I whispered urgently. She stiffened instantly, setting down the poker. Without a word, she moved to the back of the kitchen and pulled a heavy oak cupboard aside, revealing a narrow stairway leading down into the cellar. "Go," she said. "Hide. I will deal with them." I hesitated for only a second before plunging into the darkness. The stairs were steep and narrow, the air damp and musty. At the bottom was a small, hidden room, barely bigger than a cupboard. I curled up against the wall, hugging my knees, listening to the sounds above. Voices. Raised. Angry. I could hear Miss Holloway speaking, her voice cool and firm. Then Robert's voice, sharp and full of venom. "We know she is here, old woman. Hand her over, and no one gets hurt." "You have no right to barge into my home," Miss Holloway snapped. "Leave, or I will call the constable." Silence. Then a thud, something knocked over. A crash. I squeezed my eyes shut, terror freezing me in place. Would they tear the house apart? Would they find the hidden door? Minutes dragged on like hours. Finally, I heard footsteps retreating. A door slammed. Then silence. Still, I waited, too afraid to move. After what felt like an eternity, the door to the cellar creaked open, and Miss Holloway's face appeared in the faint light. "They are gone," she said softly. "For now." I stumbled out, legs trembling. Miss Holloway steadied me with a firm hand. Her stern face was pale, her mouth set in a grim line. "This changes everything," she said quietly. "They are desperate. And desperate people are dangerous." I nodded, unable to find my voice. Somewhere deep inside, I had known this would happen. Running had only delayed the inevitable. Catherine and Robert would not stop. They would chase me to the ends of the earth if they had to. And next time, I might not be so lucky. Miss Holloway placed a hand on my shoulder. "There is a way to end this," she said. "But it will require great courage, and greater risk." I lifted my head, meeting her gaze. Whatever it took, I was ready. Because this was no longer just about the inheritance. It was about survival. And justice. Miss Holloway and Mr. Whitmore gathered in the dusty parlor the next morning. The fire crackled in the hearth, but the chill in the room refused to lift. I sat between them, feeling the weight of the plan settle on my shoulders. "We must draw them out," Mr. Whitmore said, his voice grave. "Force them to make a mistake that will expose their crimes beyond any doubt." I nodded slowly, though fear curled tightly in my gut. I was the bait. There was no other way. The plan was simple but dangerous. I would appear publicly in Middlebury, the last place they would expect. We would spread word of my return and arrange a meeting at the solicitor's office. There, hidden recording devices would capture everything Catherine and Robert said. Their greed and desperation would undo them. We had only one chance. If they suspected the trap, they could disappear, taking the fortune, and any hope of justice, with them. Miss Holloway took my hand in hers, her thin fingers surprisingly strong. "You are braver than you believe, Amelia," she said quietly. "But you must be careful. Trust no one but us." 2 days later, the trap was laid. A notice was discreetly passed around town. Miss Amelia Wright was to meet with her solicitor at noon, in the heart of Middlebury. The news traveled fast, as we knew it would. By morning, I could feel the air humming with tension. I saw faces pressed against windows, heard whispers follow me down the street. I wore a simple navy coat and kept my hair tied back in a modest braid. I tried to keep my head high, though every step felt like walking through quicksand. Mr. Whitmore walked beside me, his hand never straying far from his coat pocket where a heavy stick rested. Miss Holloway followed a few steps behind, her eyes sharp as blades. When we reached the solicitor's office, my heart hammered so loudly I was certain the whole town could hear it. We stepped inside the narrow, dimly lit building and climbed the stairs to a modest meeting room at the top. Mr. Whitmore checked the devices one final time. Hidden beneath the table, tucked behind the bookshelves, recording every sound. Everything was ready. And then we waited. Minutes passed. Then footsteps echoed up the stairs. Heavy. Purposeful. The door burst open. Catherine stormed in first, her face flushed with fury. Robert was close behind, his lips curled into a sneer. "You little witch," Catherine spat, striding towards me. "How dare you show your face here after all you've done?" I stayed seated, my hands gripping the edge of the chair to steady myself. "You stole what was never yours," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Now you will answer for it." Robert laughed coldly. "Who will believe you? A penniless girl with no witnesses, no evidence." The room seemed to shrink as they closed in. Catherine leaned over me, her perfume sickly sweet and overwhelming. "You think you are clever," she hissed. "You know nothing. Your father changed his will before he died. You were to be left with nothing. But he did not die by accident, did he?" Mr. Whitmore said, stepping forward. His voice was calm, deadly. Catherine's face went pale. Robert stiffened, his eyes darting to the door. Panic flickered across their faces. Too late. Everything had been recorded. Their fury, their threats, their reckless admissions. The evidence we needed to destroy them. Suddenly, Robert lunged towards the table, realizing the trap too late. Miss Holloway moved with astonishing speed, striking his hand away with her walking cane. He stumbled back, swearing violently. The door behind them swung open again, this time revealing two constables, summoned by Mr. Whitmore in advance. Catherine and Robert froze. The fight drained from them in an instant, replaced by grim realization. The game was over. The constables moved swiftly, reading out the charges as they placed them under arrest. Fraud. Forgery. Conspiracy. And possibly more, once the full investigation was complete. As they were led away, Catherine twisted to glare at me one last time. "You think you have won," she snarled. "But this is not over." I said nothing. I simply watched as they disappeared from sight, shackled and defeated. The room fell silent. For the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to breathe. But deep inside, I knew this was only part of the battle. The true healing would take much longer. Miss Holloway laid a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You did well, my dear," she said softly. "You faced your demons. And you prevailed." The weeks that followed felt almost unreal. Catherine and Robert remained in custody, their trial set to begin in the spring. The town of Middlebury buzzed with gossip, but for the first time, I walked through its streets without shame weighing down my steps. Mr. Whitmore helped me reclaim my rightful inheritance. Piece by piece, the stolen assets were returned. Father's home, long neglected under Catherine's reign, was handed back to me. Standing before it once more, I could hardly believe it. The house looked tired, its shutters sagging and gardens overgrown, but to me, it was beautiful beyond words. It was more than timber and stone. It was hope. A symbol of survival. I decided to restore the estate, not to its former grandeur, but into something new, something truly mine. With Miss Holloway's wisdom and Mr. Whitmore's guidance, the work began. Local craftsmen and volunteers from the village offered their help. It became a labor of healing, a testament to resilience. One bright morning, as I scrubbed the dust from the parlor windows, a soft knock came at the door. I opened it to find Thomas Bennett, the baker's son, standing awkwardly with a basket of warm scones. His ears turned red as he thrust the basket towards me. "Thought you might need some breakfast," he mumbled. I smiled, touched by the simple kindness. Small moments like this stitched the torn pieces of my life back together. Word of what had happened travelled far beyond Middlebury. I received letters from relatives I barely remembered, all offering apologies, some genuine, others less so. I answered politely but kept my circle small. I had learned the hard way whom to trust. The winter melted into spring. On the day the crocuses bloomed in father's old garden, the trial began. I stood in the courtroom, my heart steady. Catherine and Robert sat across the room, pale and diminished. They no longer wore the airs of superiority that once cloaked them. The evidence spoke for itself. The recordings, the forged documents, the testimonies of those they had wronged. The jury took only a day to reach their verdict. Guilty. Sentences were read, and though the punishment could never undo the past, it brought a measure of peace. Catherine glared at me one last time as she was led away, but her hatred no longer touched me. She was powerless now, a shadow of the woman who had once tried to destroy me. Outside the courthouse, the sky was a brilliant blue, the air fresh and full of promise. I turned my face to the sun, letting the warmth sink into my skin. The past would always be a part of me, but it would no longer define me. Middlebury changed too. Where once there had been whispers and cold stares, there were now nods of respect and smiles of encouragement. The village slowly opened its heart to me again, and in doing so, gave me a place to belong. Months passed, and the house was transformed. Not into a grand estate, but into a warm, welcoming home. I opened a small school in the West Wing, teaching children who had nowhere else to go. The laughter of the young filled the halls where silence once ruled. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of gold across the fields, I stood on the porch and looked out over the land. A gentle breeze stirred the wildflowers that had taken root where once there had been only neglect. Miss Holloway joined me, leaning on her cane. "You have done well, Amelia," she said, her voice proud. I smiled, a true, unguarded smile. "I am home," I whispered. And at last, I believed it.